Our vision since the beginning has been to be an end-to-end platform. One end of that platform is AI models. The other end is human verification.
And we're back with Lilt. Great to welcome back Spence Green on the podcast today. So Spence is the CEO of Lilt, the leading AI solution for enterprise translation. Hi, Spence, and thanks so much for joining us for round two.
Hi, Florian. Good to see you again.
Are you recording this from California today or somewhere else in the world?
I am. I just got back in early this morning from 2 days. I was in Las Vegas 2 days ago for a AI conference, a commercial AI conference, which is really interesting because I would say like even 2 or 3 years ago, there wasn't, you couldn't go to like a general, sort of AI conference. Well, first of all, those types of like big conferences didn't exist. And then you couldn't really go talk about translation and localization. And now it's like a key use case that people are looking at. And then yesterday I was in Indianapolis. We have an office there, and we had a couple of staffers from the Indiana congressional delegation come by to meet with our team based on the work that we do with in the public sector, which I'd be excited to talk about.
Yeah, I saw, I think a post on X or LinkedIn about you had this booth in Las Vegas. So what's the name of that conference?
It's called AI4, and I was walking down a hall and I saw Jeffrey Hinton. So like it was like legit.
Okay. All right. Yeah, legit. If he just walks around there and you can bump into him. All right.
Yeah.
So I said it's round two. This is because it's been more than 3 years since our last podcast. So give us a progress update, if you will. So what's new at Lilt since then?
Well, I have a memory. The last time we spoke, I did the digital nomad thing in 2021. So I was living in a hotel at the time, and I think if you go back and look at the video, there's like it says DoubleTree in the back, and so like I was just thinking about that before we started talking. It's been quite an unusual period of history since that time, and so yeah, like as far as as far as Lilt goes, I think our vision since the beginning has been to be an end-to-end platform. One end of that platform is AI models. The other end is human verification. We do all of that in one package. And so I think our business model is exactly the same as it's been really since 2018. We started as a technology-only company selling AI models plus a platform. And then we found that to do business in the enterprises need a quality standard. They need to know whether the output is right or it's wrong. So therefore, you have to add people. And so it's been building on that model, and it's been really interesting to see that. I think that end-to-end model, even 2 years ago, people had allergies to, well, I want a TMS and it has to be vendor neutral, and I want to be able to pick my model, and I want to have my 5 vendors, and like having all this stuff. And what's really changed, I think, post the AI revolution, and I'm not quite sure why, I have some theories, but people are now much more software-driven and technology-driven in the way that they approach localization versus service-driven before. And if you take a more software-driven approach, then you would just like to have one piece of software and not have like 10 pieces of software and bunches of different services that go around it.
And one piece of that bigger piece of software is, of course, the NMT or the LLM or whatever does the machine translation, rather, right? And so we've been told now by many over the past few months, or I guess I've learned personally over the past, that LLMs are kind of the new NMT. So have you guys retooled for LLMs? If so, how hard was it? Are you still in the process? Does it depend on the use case, on the type of content, on the language combination?
Yeah, well, Lilt offers model choice. So we still train our own models that we ship with the system. That's the primary AI models that are used in the system. But you can also integrate with the model providers or the different AI services from Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. OpenAI sort of under Azure, and then we offer open source model option in the platform as well. So customers get to choose which models they want to use for which workflows. The Lilt platform as a whole, it's a AI auto customization platform. So it's a platform that enables you to create custom AI models that are per content type and per language. We have about 17,000 models in production right now as we speak. and they train continuously. So that's been like the whole basis of the technology since the beginning, is that you want to train continuously as you're running production. Then there's an integration layer that sits on the top that hooks into your enterprise systems. There's a workflow builder that supports about 300 different workflow types that are combinations of AI models and people. And then finally, at the end of that chain is our verification solution, which is, we have about, we support about 100 languages with linguists that we work with directly. And there are about 20 different domains of expertise from, as you would expect, medical, life sciences, legal. And we see customers use combinations of our verifiers, that we call them, and then their internal people. And so, you can use Gemini in our platform. You can use Lilt in our platform. As far as the models that we train, it's a little more complicated than, just an encoder decoder architecture or just a decoder architecture. Actually, the training techniques from both, you can kind of use them in various ways. And so we've got our current series of models out right now that are single-digit billion parameter models, and we're planning for the next phase. That'll probably be out early next year. And I think it really comes down to accuracy, but more importantly, performance cost. That's the big thing to solve.
So give our listeners kind of a sense of, when you say single billion parameters, like what would an LLM be? What would kind of an NMT be, an earlier one?
You can build multi-billion parameter plus model encoder decoder models, which is what traditionally people call NMT. And then these decoder side frameworks like GPT style models, you have those anywhere from the range of billion parameter models to trillion parameter mixture of expert models. And I think I think for the subset of use cases that really matter in enterprise localization, which are translation, quality control, like QA, rewriting, and summarization, those 4 use cases, you don't need, a trillion parameters to solve those use cases. So if you use smaller models, you get better performance cost.
And so for you, there wasn't like one point where you transition, like in a very kind of simplified way, like, okay, we used to do NMT and now we do LLM. Because you're offering your customers all of these different options, and they're kind of driving this, right? So the platform is somewhat agnostic. You have your own offering, but the clients are driving that transition if they're bringing in requirements for new models.
We have our own models for 2 reasons. One, they're still, to my knowledge, I think you look around, this sort of continuous training. I don't see it really. I know I've read there's some models that you can procure that do that, but like it really does do that. We've been doing that for 10 years. It trains as it's used, and so that capability is really important for making localization production very efficient. But also we have on-prem customers. So I mentioned our public sector customers. We have customers that run the Lilt platform in what's known as an air-gapped setting, meaning completely disconnected from the internet. So we have to have at least one solution for those different use cases that they can run in an air-gapped environment.
That's what you need to have internally, of course. So you mentioned on-prem, but let's talk about client requirements in 2024 and what you're seeing. So what are kind of the key questions, challenges that enterprise localization customers, clients are coming to you for right now? Like what has changed? What hasn't, maybe in the past 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, well, I think the big change that's happened is actually market perception, which is as follows. Post ChatGPT, every board went to every CEO and said, what are you doing with AI? And every CEO went to every CTO and said, what are you doing with AI? And every CTO set up like a task force or a council to look for use cases. And the enterprise localization and content creation use case is perfect. But that's actually been true for many, many years now. There just hasn't been like an impetus really to change. And so I would say like 2 quarters after ChatGPT, suddenly all these businesses that had not reevaluated their approach or relationships, there suddenly started to be all these RFPs and all this interest in taking a software-driven approach. So I've got a chart somewhere. I won't show it now, but if you look at the translation quality improvements over the last 3 or 4 years, like these models have gotten better. Like the state of the art models have gotten better, but it hasn't been a step function increase in capability as we've had in conversational AI. Like conversational AI didn't work 3 years ago. Now it works. Like that is a massive improvement. It's almost like when we went from statistical MT to neural MT in 2015, 2016, statistical MT didn't work very well. And then suddenly it works. There hasn't been that type of a step change improvement. So why is it that there's now so much focus on using AI for localization? I think it's actually because of the market perception change that, okay, now like there is some impulse to change this sort of services driven way that we've been working for a very, very long time.
This narrative shift is real. And if you talk to the services company, I mean, this is exactly why they're struggling, right? Because you just can't, or you could potentially justify it, but as a CTO or as a kind of a procurement leader, this is a very low hanging fruit for you.
Super low hanging fruit. Yeah, it's like one of the first things you would think of, that in customer support. So like that's getting like all of the attention.
So let's talk about 6 predictions you made in a late 2023 post on LinkedIn. They're very, very short, so I can go through them now. So if you bear with me. So first one was increased adoption of MTPE drives rates so low that linguists leave the profession. Second, which them leaving counter to the popular narrative leads to linguist shortages, especially for higher resource languages like the Nordics. Number 3, facing margin pressure, 2 of the top 5 LSPs merge. Number 4, and this is going back to the point you just raised.
How about that? I was.
It's consistent. So point number 4 is localization emerges as one of the top ROI use cases in the year of generative AI implementation. The 5 is MQM finally becomes the default quality framework. And number 6 is GPT-style models conclusively surpass traditional encoder-decoder style models in terms of quality. So why don't we just start with the ROI again? So there's been this kind of emerging narrative, or at least for me over the past, from all the podcasts I'm listening to and all that over the past 2 to 3 months, that like we're not really seeing like this massive ROI on all this, major investment that's going on. There's billions and billions, tens of billions going in, NVIDIA's going to the moon, and Google is on the record saying we'd rather overinvest than underinvest. So you're saying that localization will emerge or has emerged as one of the top use cases we just discussed, right? Low-hanging fruit where we actually do see ROI. So my question is, like, what's different here from the prior NMT cycle, maybe that makes this different in terms of ROI, and not just perception, but actual reality now?
I think that the possibility for positive ROI was possible years ago. And I think that just this particular use case, I think there's a broader narrative happening here, which is like the whole software market, if you add it up, I forget what it is, like $400 billion or something like that. It's if you add up all the software companies. But then we have services markets that are trillions of dollars. And so our whole thought has been, well, if you take these AI models and you go into these services markets where you have real differential pricing power, you can build a really big business there. And I think that's true in localization. It's true in legal services. There's a lot of work being done in accounting, obviously in customer support, all these places where you have like heavy labor and like very manual work. You can start to use AI to really change the economics of these big services markets. The real challenge is that for anything to change in the enterprise, change is associated with risk. And so there has to be some incentive in the enterprise for people to change. They're spending somebody else's money. There has to be some, reward for them to change what they've been doing for a long time. And up until recently, that reward has not been there. Now people are getting recognized in their career for driving an AI win. And I think that you see all kinds of a spectrum where, on the sort of least effortful thing you can do is go to your traditional service provider and say, hey, do MTPE. That's like sort of minimal box checking for AI win. Then there's real transformation, like really going through the entire production process and mapping it from a very heavy services style workflow to an AI and automation workflow.
Do you also think we might have had, we being the industry, we might have had a bit of a head start compared to like literally almost any other part of the economy, because we had been, trying to roll out NMT so aggressively in many areas before, but yeah, maybe there wasn't the C-level attention, but now that there is, boom, you can turn it on.
100%. And I think this industry has been exposed to, all the disciplines of AI that are old all start with machine, like machine translation, machine understanding. These are all disciplines from the 50s and 60s, from the early days of AI. And so certainly people in this industry have been exposed to using intelligent systems for a very, very long time. And I think that, at the same time, it's more been this like incremental approach where really then in the last 2 years, there's been people stepping up and driving real transformation and changing like fundamentally how processes work that they haven't visited in 10 years.
What have you seen in terms of the decision making within the enterprise? I mean, yes, the push is coming from the board to the CEO to the CTO and down into the organization, but have certain decisions also been made at a higher level, and therefore it was kind of easier to push change through?
I mean, I think in large enterprise, when you have executive sponsorship at the top level, it's much easier to drive change and alignment. And then there's also a career reward for making a change. If there's no incentive, then why change anything? And I think that's what's really changed, is there being a career incentive. I was at a conference last fall, and one of our customers came up to me and she said, she goes, I just got it. This is a big company too. And she goes, I just got an email from the CEO wanting to know what my AI strategy was. And I said, well, what'd you say? And he's like, well, I'm coming to talk to you to like talk about it. And I said, well, the good news is you already have an AI strategy. You've been using AI for, 2 years now. So let's just sit down and talk about how you can, sort of describe what you are doing up to an executive level. And so I think, that had never happened before at her company. And so that's where she can get recognized for, she actually made a forward-leaning change 2 years ago, didn't really get recognized for it. And now there's like focus on this use case, and she can get recognized for that.
Now you said that there's focus on that use case. What about kind of the perceptual problem maybe among some that it's a solved problem? I mean, how many times have we now read like, above human above human quality and everything like that? Do you run into this as maybe even a sales problem? Like that people are saying, what, isn't this solved yet? Or is that maybe at a lower level, and as soon as you go into like bigger enterprise settings, they recognize the complexity and nuance of it?
We call this internally the GPT-7 question.
We're still waiting for GPT-5, man.
Yeah, what I would say is there's certainly outside of people in the day-to-day operations of localization, I think like at the executive level, or even when I talk to other people who are interested in the industry, whether that's like investors or executives or like friends or whatever, I think the people's exposure to the consumer use case and freely available consumer apps, whatever they may be, and that it works really well to translate a restaurant menu or to have a conversation with your friend, or to like nobody walks around Europe anymore holding like a phrase book. They just use their phone, and that works really well. And so people generalize from the consumer use case to the enterprise use case, which has a whole host of different problems that you need to deal with. One of them is obviously like quality verification, but what does quality mean? It depends on the business context. For some use cases, it could be regulatory compliance. We work with law enforcement. So for there, you have to raise text to an evidentiary standard. For highly creative companies, it's could be a brand voice that they're trying to articulate. And so in each one of these business contexts, you've got to have like sort of context of the situation to create something that's fit for purpose. And then on top of that, you've got the usual enterprise problems, which are complex systems infrastructure that you have to integrate with. You have business workflows where, in businesses, you're not just creating one web page, you're creating 1,000 web pages. And you have to do that at scale and then enforce the standard across. And then you've got to do all of that very cost efficiently. So I think those are kind of the standard enterprise problems, and AI and automation help, but they don't solve the problem end to end. So that's generally where I think this comes from, is familiarity with the consumer case and then mapping that onto business.
So let's talk about one of the other predictions where you said that increased adoption of MTPE drives rates so low that linguists leave the profession altogether. So that's going to, not sure if it caused a stir, but it's maybe somewhat controversial, but it's probably real. And in your case, I guess that would touch the, what do you call it, verification layer, right? And so my question would be, it's almost like a macroeconomic question. So like, wouldn't you expect the market to just adjust the pricing again upward if like there's actual shortages happening in the market, or like where's the failure in that mechanism here?
It's a good question. And I think it certainly is happening. But what is happening is as follows. So you've got a highly distributed freelance workforce that's not organized in any way. So if the whole one side of the market, which are the buyers basically, which are LSPs, if they're just all of a sudden setting the rate to $1.50 per word or something like that, what is the supply side of the market going to do if it's not organized? Because any individual freelancer on the supply side has comparatively low power against the buy side. So that is absolutely what is happening. And it is harder for us to find high quality linguists these days. That's definitely happened since the beginning of the year. What I do see happening is linguists getting really creative and using all kinds of tools to try to make themselves more efficient. And so they will just like a thing that you've really got to deal with. We have a bunch of technology in our system now to deal with people just pasting like ChatGPT output into as a response. Because, okay, if I'm not going to get paid very much, I might as well just put it in ChatGPT, send it back and call it done. And so it's actually raised the bar for quality control mechanisms and performance management significantly in the last 6 months. So I think that's actually how the supply chain is responding, is just sending AI output back.
Okay. It's interesting to say it's harder to find quality linguists. So there may be like a temporary, I wouldn't call it a market failure, right? But eventually it might adjust. Like you're going to have to say, well, okay, I'm just not getting those high, expert linguists, and I'm going to have to pay a little bit more. But before that happens and they come back, there is a shortage. So
yeah, it's a supply and demand situation, and I think there's an imbalance right now. I think going back to our earlier conversation, there is an expectation. Part of the executive conversation is, well, why isn't translation just free? Like the consumer use case is free. I have an app on my phone, and so there's real, an expectation on the business side to drive pricing down. But I think there's a little bit of an over rotation right now in that. If you want verification, like there's some cost of having a human being involved. And so I think what's important is, every business should decide whether you can just go without any verification, just like use Google Translate or, Amazon or Microsoft or whatever you choose. If that actually solves your use case, then terrific. But if it doesn't, then that's necessarily not free.
Yeah. And arguably that human must be more qualified than 5 or 10 years ago, because for you to catch any error or any issue in this super high quality AI output is not easy.
So that's exactly the way to think about it. So the AI model does some work, okay? And it does more work than it used to 3 or 4 years ago because these models are more accurate. Then you can do fine tuning on top of that. That gets even more accuracy. And then there's a gap that's left, which is whatever the work is that people do. And because there's not much gap left, that's where real human ingenuity, creativity, planning, reasoning, strategy, context integration, that all comes in. And so it's actually higher skilled work that's happening there. For you to add value on top of an AI model, it's necessarily higher skilled work.
I keep testing that with some of the kind of public MT that I have access to, with like one of the specialty that I used to do as a translator back in the day, like equity research, and it's getting like I can still notice it. Like there's some things that I would pick, but like just your normal person, just there's no way like they just read it. And this is perfect. So yeah, that gap narrowing makes it harder. So you mentioned kind of enterprise and corporate. What about public sector? You said you were in Indianapolis talking to a client. Like, so how is price sensitivity there, or just similar drivers at play in the public sector?
Well, the public sector, and I can just speak for the governments that we work with. So I'll talk about defense and intelligence use cases, and then I'll talk about civilian use cases. And maybe let me talk about the civilian use case first. So, for example, this one is public. The National Weather Service in the United States, now all the weather alerts that come out of the U.S. government in 6 different languages now are processed through Lilt. And the problem that we had in this country was in 2021, there was a hurricane, and a number of people died who didn't speak English, and they didn't get weather alerts. And so there was a root cause analysis done, and Congress decided that the reason was that these people didn't speak English. They didn't hear that this hurricane was coming. And so they they gave the Weather Service a mandate to start distributing weather alerts in other languages. And so we started working with the Weather Service in the middle of 2022, just doing hurricane alerts in Spanish. And now across the whole country, we have all of the Weather Service's products in 6 different languages. And that's the first time that people have been able to access like live weather information. You can see this for yourself on weather.gov/translate. That's actually Lilt running in the background. And what's cool was they did have a little bit of translation activity happening, but they had meteorologists doing that. So they had meteorologists in San Juan, Puerto Rico, translating weather alerts. Well, we don't have enough meteorologists, and we need them to be doing meteorology, not translation. So what they did was they had the meteorologists fine-tune models in Lilt. And then they found that those models were very accurate for weather alerts. They're they're technical, but they're easy to memorize. And so the quality is very, very high. For the Chinese model, we found one meteorologist in Arizona who was a native Chinese speaker. He trained the model. And then now everybody in the US has weather alerts in Chinese. And so the government's problem is it doesn't have enough speakers of languages of strategic interest. On the civilian side, that could be serving populations that are not English speakers. On the defense and intelligence side, there is historically a gap in the language capabilities that the government has versus the parts of the world that it cares about, whether that's, in the United States case, Russia, China, Ukraine, Middle East, Iran. There just simply are not enough people who speak those languages for the type of either diplomatic or intelligence work that needs to happen. And that's a great place where we can hire AI. So we can hire AI in those settings to be able to do the types of work to keep the country safe. And the challenge, though, is it's running in very secure environments with very complicated infrastructure. And to get AI into those environments requires a lot of effort.
All right, let's talk about one of the recent features you launched, AI Analytics. You say it offers insights into the impact of AI on localization. So can you just tell us a bit more about how these features work and how they help companies evaluate effectiveness and ROI of translation? Because it's one thing to say that there is ROI, but you need to track it as a buyer as well. That's probably pretty hard.
Yeah, so the analytics feature I'm really excited about. One of the claims that we make and the promises we make to our customers is they have complete end-to-end observability over the production process. And what this means is on the AI side, they know exactly which models are being used. So we're not doing things like sending it to 5 different model providers that you don't know who they are, and then like picking the best one and then giving you that, and you're not quite sure like where all of your data is going. You can configure the system so you know exactly where your data is going. Either it's going to one of our models and it stays in our data center, or you say, I want to use Gemini, and then you know that your data is going to Gemini in your account, and then all the way through to the linguist. You know exactly the verifiers, who's working. We don't subcontract to other vendor, services providers, and the data never leaves our platform. So it gives you visibility from end to end. Okay, so then this analytics function lets you see what's happening end to end. And the one that I'm most excited about is a a view that we call AI accuracy. And what it shows live is what I just described to you earlier, which is what is the baseline model quality? What is the model quality after customization? And so you can see how much customization is helping. And that is it's a very simple measure. It's the fraction of verified words that we deliver that are AI generated versus human corrected. And so you can think about that as a, like how much work are the AI models doing? And then there's another view, which we call verification effort. And that shows actually what the human beings are doing. So what kinds of errors are they catching? And like, what are you actually paying for? Because we're telling you that you need verification. Okay, great. What work is being done? And then I can go in and see they're fixing product names. You know, the AI models are actually not very high quality. So they're fixing sort of mistranslations and other stylistic issues. It shows you all that live. And it breaks it down by language so you can figure out where the AI models are not as accurate as you would expect. And then the third view is showing like a map of where all the content is in the enterprise. So all of the integrations, it shows what all the connections are, how much content is routing through them, what the accuracy of the models are in each one of the integrations. And so you can see like where all the content is routing inside the enterprise. So it's like a cockpit. It lets you see everything that AI and people and systems are doing within your program.
Yeah, and you need that to be end to end. So if you're the head of localization or content, yeah, that's a great dashboard to have. I want to talk about multilingual content creation or generation from scratch, which I've been, I don't know, wanting to talk to everybody about ever since I first used ChatGPT. It seems like it's not really breaking through, but I mean, on your website now, one of the taglines is the most proven enterprise solution for creating and translating content. And so far, we've mostly talked about localization and translation. Where do you see this going? Click, boom, it goes like prompt to 20 versions. Like, is this a thing? Is it ever going to scale? Is it breaking through or not?
Yeah. So what you're describing is the content creation use case. So once you run localization and you get a bunch of data, either bilingual or monolingual data that's specific to that business. And then you can turn around and use that data for generation. So you can say, write me a blog post in Swiss German about Florian at Slator and all of the thrilling interviews that he does, and summarize the last 3 months of interviews or whatever, and it'll just write it'll generate a blog post in German and using your data, and then you could go in and correct it and fix it up. And it's really designed for I think the two use cases that we've seen are like regional marketers that would like to generate new content on the edge, but they don't have time to do that, and they get frustrated waiting for a localization supply chain. So it helps them generate new stuff on the edge. Another use case is HR. So like learning and development teams internally that are generating documentation to support employees. That's another good use case. And so those are the two that we've seen kind of pick up. I think it's still early, though. A lot of people are just getting their brains around using AI for their core localization workflow. And then the next step is going to content creation. I believe that there will still be, for those cases, and we've got this built into our platform, a verification step where you want to generate something, you want to kind of look through it, and then maybe you want to still send it to a verifier before it gets published. So I just think that, in the future, you're going to be able to decide, okay, this piece of content already exists. I want to translate that. I imagine some other new piece of content. I want to generate that. And that could be a video or text. And those are the thing that unites those two workflows is the context-specific data about that business. And if you have that context-specific data, then you can serve both of those use cases.
So let's go back to the translation use case and post-editing MT. So one of the common complaints is just the UI, that it's just still not built for the post editing. Like you get, the output and then you edit and then, you don't like it. So it's not interactive. Lilt was obviously a pioneer in the interactivity component. So tell us more. Where are you at? What are you hearing from the linguists? Where is it going?
The original version of Lilt, and even still today, was an interactive text completion interface. So you would get a prediction, and then you would start typing, and then it would complete the translation for you based on what you would type so far. And now that type of text completion interface we see with ChatGPT, and it's just like a natural interaction mode. It's not new either. I mean, Google search has worked that way for a long time. We've had search auto completion for a long time. And so I think it's still the case that very few of the workflow, translation workflow tools have that type of text auto completion. Our system does, and the way that we set up our supply chain, the faster we make linguists, the more we can drive the efficiency of the workflow. So we basically monetize productivity is the way that we do it. And so I think that's why our incentive is to make the work as efficient as possible. I think the thing that will definitely change in probably the next year is moving away, and this to your earlier question about the LLM style architectures where you can feed more context into the input. We'll move away from segment level interfaces and towards more document level interfaces. There's a variety of user interface challenges that you need to solve to do that. But I think that'll be the next, sort of the next phase in the types of tooling that people use to do verification.
I will demand a trial account when you roll this out. I need to check that out. That will be the best press release for like 100,000 translators. Hey, we're doing away with the segment. Like that will be big news.
I'll dwell on this. This is maybe slightly technical for the audience, but the segment level view, people are like, oh, segments are bad, but it really, the real challenge is the underlying document structure. And so one of the problems you have to solve in the enterprise localization use case is you have to reconstruct documents that get published somewhere. And those documents have some underlying structure that you have to use to rebuild the PDF or rebuild the HTML file or rebuild the docx file or whatever. And sort of presenting a document level view and still preserving all the underlying document structure, I think, is where a little bit of the technical challenge comes in.
Just from a language point of view, it's that you're always beholden to this kind of, sentence period, and certain languages don't have the same cadence, like naturally, in terms of where to put the period. So,
correct.
What are your thoughts about workflow orchestration, which has kind of been a bigger thing now in the localization industry over the past, I guess, 12 to 18 months? I mean, is that something that you feel you've kind of inbuilt anyway because it's end to end, or is something you're looking at?
Yeah, so we have in our system, we have it's called Connect Builder. So our integration product is called Lilt Connect, and Connect Builder, which we launched, last fall maybe. So it's been about a year now. It's a no-code workflow builder, and so it enables you to connect to a system via an integration, and then set up a workflow, a series of stages. That are combinations of AI models and people. And all of the stages are integrated with the human feedback training. So that's what's kind of unique about it, is that, if there are people involved, it collects feedback to train the models. If there are AI models involved, they take outputs from other AI models to do things like rewriting. And so we've got this sort of workflow builder. And I think that this is really like a big step in the right direction in terms of being able to help you visualize like what's an efficient workflow process and have that done in software versus using spreadsheets or email, or like all that stuff sounds 1990s, but that is a lot of what's still happening in the enterprise, somewhat surprisingly. So that's a step forward. I think that the big issue that needs to be solved right now is extending that to both pre and post processing. So areas where you have complex file formats or things that have to be handled or post production stages. Those are some of the things that are not quite captured yet in these sort of complex workflow builders and what needs to be done next. But for the standard localization workflows, man, you really we have a strategy internally that we call zero touch, meaning like projects flow end to end without any human intervention, and you just have humans who manage exceptions. And I think for the majority of localization use cases, you can do that now in software, and really just have people managing exceptions.
I want to talk briefly about kind of the fundraising environment, right? I mean, it's been for SaaS, it's been a rough 18 months. For AI, I don't know what it was, like a super hot and very kind of frothy 18 months. So you're kind of sitting there almost in the middle, and also I noticed that you were on a New York Stock Exchange TV interview in May 2024. So would that signal that maybe even the IPO window may eventually be opening for the language industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think obviously the fundraising environment for all emerging companies has been really challenging since interest rates went up, and I think that's true in the United States and in Europe as well. And so, as long as they remain elevated, as long as the cost of capital is high, then the real focus is going to be on business efficiency, and that's certainly what's going on right now. I think a lot of the, AI funding was a little bit unusual in that the majority of the funding has been from strategic investors, from like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and their deals of the sort, give you $1 billion, and that includes $900,000 of AWS credits that you have to spend with me. So there's this sort of balance sheet recycling that is happening. Whereas, and then there's a lot of focus on the early stage, Series C, Series A, that are pre-revenue in a lot of cases, and you can kind of tell yourself a story about how big a business is going to get at that stage. It's a lot more about narrative than financial performance. So I think that's made it more challenging for businesses that are at the revenue scale-up stage to seek capital. But hopefully, it can't stay this way forever. I don't think that's. I think things will normalize from. They were completely out of control in 2021. I think they've been very grim for the last 2 years, and I'm hopeful that they'll normalize to sort of the 10-year average, and things will get back to normal. So yeah, I think that's that, and then I think there's a little bit of a counter narrative about AI right now in public markets, but I think if you mark the beginning of the sort of the internet platform revolution as the release of the Netscape browser in '95, and you map that onto ChatGPT in 2022, then we're kind of in 1997 right now. And Amazon went public in '97, Google was founded in '98, Facebook was founded in 2004. So there's a lot. I think the huge applications of all this compute that's being set up are still in the future. And compute's like energy. We humans, we find ways to use it. So the fact that there's just more compute available in the world is probably a good thing.
So where do you deploy your compute in 2024 and 2025? What are the plans? What are some of the initiatives and features that are coming?
Well, like I said, we've got our new V3.5 models out. Those are, we just started releasing them in July. We shipped them to our on-prem customers at the end of July, and they're out in the cloud version now. The team, our research team, is planning the V4 models, which will be larger and more capable than the V3.5 models. So I think that's the major push on the AI part of our business. And I think that what's really exciting is historically there just were not open source models that were strong that you could build on. Going back 10 years now, I'm saying like open source machine translation models, we've always built them from scratch. And now some of these newer open source large language models are very capable, and you can focus your attention on post-training on top of them, and or using them in various ways to make using like distillation to make smaller models more effective, and that makes it easier for non-big tech companies to field really capable AI systems. And I think that's generally generally a good thing. It's always been very, I think, unaffordable for you to basically say like, I'm gonna take on Google or Microsoft on architecture search. I mean, they own data centers and they have tons of cash, and that's kind of a losing battle on a long-term basis. But if you focus on specializing AI systems to specific business use cases, that's not what the big tech companies do. They're building horizontal technologies. And so I think where companies can come in and build really exciting and really impactful businesses is specializing these technologies to specific business use cases like localization and content creation.
All right. Thanks so much for taking the time today, Spence. If you want to meet with the Lilt team, join us at SlatorCon Silicon Valley. So we're coming to your part of the world on September 4th. Lilt is going to be hosting the welcome reception. And then, of course, they're going to stick around for the September 5th main conference. So, yeah, thanks so much for doing this today, Spence.
Thank you, Florian. Good to chat.